Birds scatter from the rooftops as the camera slowly pans toward a small apartment window, glowing with morning light. Ariana Wolk's art captured the beauty of life, until her own became the canvas for a killer's obsession. In the peaceful town of Millstone, she was known for her paintings, vivid colors, silent emotion, and a warmth that drew people in. But behind every brushstroke was a woman being watched, studied, and followed. When her unfinished canvas was found covered in red, detectives uncovered a story far darker than anyone imagined. A story of love, control, and obsession turned deadly. Millstone, Colorado, was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted to forget the noise of the city. The streets were lined with maple trees that turned the whole town golden in the fall. Children rode bicycles down narrow sidewalks, and the most exciting news was usually about a new bakery opening or a lost cat being found. It was a quiet, predictable town where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Everyone knew everyone else's business, or at least they believed they did. Beneath that layer of calm, there were secrets no one wanted to uncover, and one of those secrets belonged to a young woman named Ariana Wolk. Ariana lived in a small apartment above a bookstore near the park. From her window, she could see the sunset spill across the hills, and most evenings she sat by that window with her paintbrushes scattered around her. She had moved to Millstone 2 years earlier, after leaving behind a difficult breakup and a fast-paced city life. To the neighbors, she was quiet but polite. She smiled when she passed them in the hallway, waved to the kids playing outside, and helped old Mrs. Klein carry groceries when her hands were full. Everyone described her as kind, talented, and a little mysterious. Her art reflected pieces of herself: loneliness, longing, and beauty hidden under sadness. She often painted faces without eyes, cityscapes drenched in rain, and women standing on cliffs looking toward distant lights. Her Instagram account had a small but loyal following, and sometimes she sold her paintings to tourists passing through town. Ariana spent her nights painting, listening to soft music, and drinking herbal tea. She liked solitude, and she guarded it carefully. But recently, something had changed. Friends noticed she seemed distracted. Her landlord mentioned she had asked if anyone could access the rooftop near her apartment. The cashier at the cafe said she sometimes looked over her shoulder as if she expected someone to be there. She started locking her doors earlier than usual. Still, no one thought much of it. People assumed she was just tired or lost in thought like many artists often were. What no one knew was that Ariana had started receiving strange messages online. They weren't threatening, just unsettling. Comments about her art that seemed too personal, references to things she had never posted publicly. Once, a note was slipped under her door that simply said, "Some colors look better in the dark." She told no one, convincing herself it was a prank. Yet deep down, she felt a slow, creeping unease. The summer days stretched long, filled with heat and still air. Nights were quiet, almost too quiet. The hum of streetlights and the sound of crickets were the only things breaking the silence. Ariana had begun leaving one lamp on at night, as if the glow could keep her safe from whatever shadows had started to follow her. No one realized that Millstone's peace was already cracking. The woman who brought beauty to its walls and colors to its skies was being watched. Somewhere out there, someone knew her routines, her habits, and her fears. The town that prided itself on knowing everyone would soon discover that sometimes, even in the smallest, safest places, monsters can live right next door, waiting for the perfect night to strike. The night Ariana disappeared began like any other. The air was thick with the scent of summer rain, and the streets glistened under the faint glow of old street lamps. At the corner cafe, she sat by the window, sketching in her worn leather notebook. A few customers came and went, but Ariana stayed, lost in her world of charcoal lines and soft pencil shading. She drew until the cafe owner began closing up for the night. Security cameras captured her leaving at exactly 9:47 p.m., her tote bag slung over one shoulder, her her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She turned right toward Millstone Park, her usual shortcut home. The park was empty except for a few flickering lights and the distant sound of a barking dog. It wasn't unusual for her to take that path. She often said she liked the quiet, the feeling of being alone beneath the trees. But that night, someone else was there too. A shadow lingered near the benches, waiting just beyond the glow of the lamps. No one noticed. The town had already gone to sleep. Around 11:30 p.m., a neighbor in the building across from Ariana's apartment thought she saw movement in her window. A faint silhouette pacing back and forth. Moments later, the light inside flickered and went dark. The neighbor assumed the power had tripped, or that Ariana had simply gone to bed. A few minutes after midnight, another resident heard a dull thud, something that sounded like furniture being knocked over. Then came the sound of a dog barking again, sharper this time, followed by silence. Morning came quietly, just like every other morning in Millstone. But Ariana's window stayed closed. The mail piled up outside her door. Her phone rang endlessly, unanswered. It wasn't until Sunday that her landlord decided to check on her. He had noticed she hadn't sent her rent payment, something she was always punctual about. When she didn't respond to his knocks, he unlocked the door and stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Not foul, but metallic, sharp, and cold. The living room was a mess. A lamp lay shattered on the floor. Paint was smeared across the wooden boards, and her easel had fallen sideways. On the wall, her latest painting was still drying, but something about it was off. It looked like someone had dragged their hand through the wet paint, leaving red streaks that didn't belong there. He called the police immediately, his voice shaking. When officers arrived, they found no sign of Ariana. Her phone, laptop, and keys were gone. The window that faced the park was open just enough for someone to climb through. There were faint footprints on the sill, leading in, but none leading out. A single strand of long dark hair clung to the broken lamp. Nothing else seemed missing, not even her money. By the evening, Millstone's peaceful streets were filled with flashing lights and murmuring neighbors. Yellow tape surrounded the small apartment, and whispers began spreading before the detectives could even finish collecting evidence. Someone mentioned seeing a man near the park the night before, tall and wearing a hoodie. Another swore they heard footsteps outside their window. Rumors grew like wildfire. The next day, an eerie post appeared on Ariana's art account. Some colors can't be washed away. No one knew who uploaded it, but the timestamp showed it was posted after she vanished. That was when the town realized Ariana Wolk wasn't missing. She was gone, and something far more sinister had begun. Detective Laura Finch arrived at the apartment just as the sun began to rise over Millstone. She had seen countless crime scenes in her 12 years on the force, but there was something about this one that felt different. The apartment was small, neat, and filled with pieces of Ariana's art. Canvases leaned against walls, sketchbooks stacked carefully on shelves. It was the home of someone who lived for creation, not chaos. Yet chaos was exactly what Laura found. The living room floor was marked with scuff prints and smears of dried blood. The glass from the shattered lamp glittered like ice in the morning light. Something terrible had happened here, and whoever had done it had taken their time to erase the trail. The first discovery came from the hallway camera outside Ariana's apartment. The device had been turned off manually at 9:52 p.m., just minutes after Ariana was seen leaving the cafe. The footage before that moment showed nothing unusual, just Ariana unlocking her door, carrying her sketchbook, and stepping inside. After that, the screen went black. There were no signs of forced entry, which meant she had likely known the person she let in. The balcony door was slightly ajar, but it wasn't damaged. It looked like someone had exited carefully, quietly, almost as if they didn't want anyone to notice. Forensics combed through every inch of the room. A partial footprint was lifted near the balcony. Men's size 10, a pattern that matched hiking boots. Near the couch, an officer found a broken gold bracelet, delicate and bent out of shape. Laura bagged it immediately, noting that Ariana didn't appear to wear much jewelry. On the edge of the kitchen counter sat an unfinished cup of tea, still half full, as if she had been interrupted mid-sip. The details told a story. Ariana had been at home, relaxed, when something, or someone, interrupted her peace. When her phone records came in, the last message she had received was from an unsaved number. "Can I come over? Just for a few minutes." It was sent at 9:41 p.m., just 6 minutes before she was seen walking home. The number led to a prepaid phone, registered under a fake name. Whoever she met that night had planned every step. The tech team continued searching through her online accounts. Most were normal, emails from art buyers, comments from followers, a few spam messages. But one account caught their attention, a private group chat for local artists where Ariana had shared her latest works. Within that group, there was a user who seemed far too interested in her life. His messages were constant, personal, and strangely possessive. The name he used was Eli Crawford. Detective Finch requested his background check and found that he lived only a few blocks away. He was a photographer, 34 years old, and had no criminal record. Still, something about the frequency of his contact with Ariana and his proximity raised red flags. She printed his picture from his website and compared it to a blurry reflection captured in a nearby store's CCTV camera around 10 p.m. that night. The build, the shape of the shoulders, even the way he carried his bag. It was a close match. By the end of the day, Laura had enough to believe this wasn't a random break-in. Ariana's disappearance wasn't about theft or opportunity. It was something personal, something dark. Someone had wanted her, watched her, and waited for the right night to take her. The empty apartment, the silent park, and that chilling online post all pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't just a murder. It was an obsession that had finally turned deadly. Detective Laura Finch drove to Eli Crawford's apartment the next morning, her instincts already whispering that he was more than just a name on a screen. His residence was on the edge of Millstone, in an old brick building that overlooked the same park Ariana often walked through. When she arrived, Eli opened the door before she even knocked twice. He appeared calm, almost too calm. His clothes were neat, his eyes sharp, and there was a faint smell of chemicals in the air, the kind photographers used to develop prints. He invited her in, but Laura declined, choosing to talk from the hallway while observing every inch of him. His answers to her questions were polite and measured. He said he had been home editing photos all night, claimed he didn't see or hear anything unusual, and expressed mild surprise that Ariana was missing. Everything about him seemed controlled, rehearsed, like a man performing for an invisible audience. Later that day, Laura received a copy of Eli's photography portfolio. His work was striking, full of haunting portraits and empty landscapes, but something about it unsettled her. She noticed that several of the backgrounds matched places Ariana had been seen in her own social media posts. Same corners, same alleyways, even the same park bench. The overlap couldn't be coincidence. When she checked the metadata on his digital files, the timestamps didn't align with the upload times. They had been altered. His claim of editing photos during the night of the disappearance no longer made sense. The investigation deepened. Forensics confirmed that the footprint found near Ariana's balcony matched a brand of boots that Eli owned, and the broken gold bracelet found at the crime scene had traces of a metal polish found in his apartment. Laura returned for a second interview, but this time she came prepared with a search warrant. Inside, his apartment was tidy, but beneath that surface of order lay something disturbing. The walls were covered with photographs, portraits of strangers, empty rooms, and blurred figures walking through streets. Yet, in one corner of the living room was a small table stacked with photos of Ariana. Some were clearly taken from her social media pages, but others were not. These were private moments. Her unlocking her apartment door, walking through the park, or painting by the window. They weren't professional shots. They were surveillance. In his bedroom, officers found a box labeled Project A. Inside were memory cards, printed emails, and sketches of Ariana's apartment layout. The discovery painted a horrifying picture. Eli had been following her for months, documenting her routines, studying her movements. To him, she wasn't a person. She was a subject, a muse, a possession he believed he understood better than anyone else. When confronted, Eli maintained his composure. He insisted the photos were for an upcoming art project about urban isolation. He denied knowing where Ariana was and even offered to assist in finding her. His voice never wavered, his eyes never darted. But beneath that steady mask, Laura sensed something dangerous. A man who believed his lies were art, who saw his obsession not as a crime, but as creation. As night fell, Laura sat in her car outside Eli's building, watching the light from his window flicker on and off. She knew this wasn't the end of the story. People like him didn't stop at admiration or obsession. They crossed lines quietly, believing they were entitled to the lives they fixated on. Somewhere in Millstone, Ariana's trail had gone cold, but the darkness surrounding Eli Crawford was only beginning to reveal its shape. The warrant to search Eli Crawford's home had opened a door Detective Laura Finch could no longer close. What she found inside lingered in her thoughts long after she left. The basement was darker than the rest of the apartment, the air thick with the scent of old chemicals and damp concrete. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly, casting flickering shadows across the walls. It was there that Laura and her team uncovered the most disturbing pieces of evidence yet. The space looked like an improvised darkroom. Tables were lined with developing trays, rolls of undeveloped film, and photographs pinned to strings with wooden clips. The images covered every inch of the wall, each one featuring Ariana in different moments of her life. Some showed her walking through the park, sitting in the cafe, or unlocking her apartment door. Others were closer, more intimate. Her asleep near her window, her painting late at night, unaware of the camera pointed through the glass. Every image captured her vulnerability, her isolation. It wasn't art. It was obsession. In one corner, officers found a box labeled with Ariana's initials. Inside were small keepsakes: a paintbrush, a piece of fabric from her curtain, an old coffee cup lid, and a strand of hair wrapped in tissue paper. Each object was catalogued and preserved as if they were sacred. Laura's stomach twisted as she imagined Eli collecting them one by one, building a shrine to the woman he could never possess. Among the photographs was one that made her freeze, a picture of Ariana taken inside her apartment on the night she vanished. The timestamp matched the time her front door camera had gone offline. It was proof that Eli had been there. Forensics linked the gold bracelet found at the crime scene to an image of Eli from a year earlier, where he wore the same accessory on his wrist during a gallery event. The footprint by the balcony was a perfect match for his boots, still stained with a faint reddish-brown mark that tested positive for blood. Everything pointed to him, yet Eli refused to break. During interrogation, he remained eerily composed, his voice low and detached. He repeated that Ariana had inspired him, that his art was a reflection of connection, and that people misunderstood his intentions. He spoke as if her disappearance were part of a performance he was still directing. Then came the most chilling discovery. Ariana's cloud storage, accessed through her art account, contained a single hidden folder automatically synced from her laptop camera. Inside was a 30-second video. The footage showed Ariana painting in her living room, then looking up toward the door as someone entered. Only the outline of a figure could be seen, but the build, the way he moved, it was unmistakably Eli. Ariana stepped back, startled. The image shook, the lamp crashed, and the screen went black. The timestamp, 9:49 p.m. Laura watched the clip again and again, each time feeling a deeper sense of unease. The evidence was overwhelming, yet Eli's demeanor never cracked. When asked about the photos and the video, he merely smiled and said art was meant to make people uncomfortable. To him, Ariana's terror had been another form of expression. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. Every detail replayed in her mind. The shrine, the photos, the calm in Eli's voice. She knew the case wasn't about impulse or rage. It was about control. He had watched, waited, and taken her life like he was composing a final masterpiece. The truth was horrifyingly clear. Eli Crawford hadn't just killed Ariana Wolk. He had turned her existence into his last piece of art, one that the world would never forget. The trial of Eli Crawford began 6 months after his arrest, but in Millstone, it felt as though the shadows of that night had never lifted. The town that once prided itself on peace now lived with the unease of knowing that a killer had walked among them, unnoticed. Every street corner, every cafe table seemed to carry whispers of Ariana Wolk's name. Her absence had left a silence heavier than grief, a reminder that evil could wear an ordinary face. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps each morning, cameras flashing as Eli was escorted inside, his expression calm and unreadable, as if he were merely attending an art exhibition rather than facing charges of first-degree murder. In court, the evidence laid out against him was overwhelming. The photographs, the hidden video, the shrine in his basement, the DNA traces found on Ariana's balcony, all painted a picture of calculated obsession. The prosecution argued that Eli had meticulously planned the crime, disabling her camera, cutting the power to her lights, and entering her home through the unlocked balcony. Witnesses testified to his fascination with Ariana's life, describing how he spoke about her work as if it belonged to him. The jury listened in tense silence as the video from her laptop was played in the courtroom. Some turned their eyes away before it ended. The sound of the lamp breaking echoed in the stillness, followed by the abrupt cut to black. That single moment carried more weight than any words could. Throughout it all, Eli remained detached. When he spoke, it was only to deny intent. He claimed he had entered her home that night to talk, and that the situation had spiraled beyond control. He never admitted to killing her, yet never denied being there. His attorney tried to argue mental instability, presenting him as a troubled artist lost in obsession, but the evidence stripped away every excuse. What haunted everyone most was Eli's complete lack of remorse. He watched his own crimes be displayed before the court, like a curator observing his own gallery, expressionless and still. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom was silent. Guilty on all counts, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Eli's reaction was nothing more than a faint smirk, as if even this outcome had been part of the narrative he had written for himself. Detective Laura Finch, sitting in the back row, felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. Justice had been served, but nothing could undo what had been taken. A week later, Ariana's remains were discovered near Millstone Creek, wrapped carefully in one of her unfinished canvases. The river had preserved what the town had already mourned. The painting's colors had faded, but traces of her brush strokes were still visible, a heartbreaking signature of the life she left behind. The discovery led to a memorial in the town square, where her friends displayed her remaining artworks under a single banner that read, "The colors she left behind." People gathered, some in tears, some in quiet reflection, as music played softly in the background. Millstone slowly returned to its routine, but the innocence it once carried was gone. Residents began locking their doors, installing cameras, and avoiding the park after dark. Yet, every time the sun set over the hills, Ariana's apartment window, now empty, seemed to glow faintly in the evening light. It was as if her spirit lingered, watching the town she once loved, reminding them of the fragile line between beauty and darkness. Detective Finch often walked by that street, pausing to look up, knowing that some stories never truly end. In the stillness of the night, Millstone kept its secret close, whispering the name of the woman who had painted its piece, and whose death had shattered it forever.